Welcome on and all to another unedited and typical Mike style diary. Today I just have this picture with this other picture, and I already recorded part of this and I was ad-libbing and going and everything, and then I bloody realized that my stupid face, like this, was covering this map. But I need to show you the map. Anyway, I'll try to be quick about it. So over here, what you see is a little map. This is taken from Google Maps. It's modern, okay? And this is a map of, this is the northeastern bit of Italy. This is the southwesternmost bit of Slovenia. And this is northwesternmost bit of Croatia. This entire peninsula here is called Istria, or Istra, depending on who you ask. All of these names have translations both in Slavic-rooted languages and in Italian, fundamentally. Okay, why is that? Because these lands have been in contention for a stupid amount of time, like thousands of years. So, for example, this entire coast over here, right, used to be Italian, or it was populated by Italian people. I was born here. To give you an example, here it says Koper. Koper is the Slovenian name of that city. That city is not called Koper. The city's original name, the name as I understood it to be original, is Capodistria. Capodistria means the head of Istra, the top of Istra. That makes perfect sense. Koper doesn't make any sense at all. Right? Over here, instead, you have all of these cities that are in Croatian. Same logic applies. Like, for example, Rovinj. Rovinj is not a Slavic word. It just makes no sense. It's a word that has been Slavicized, which is very typical of these places. I'll talk about it in a second. But Rovinj is actually Rovigno. And that's makes a lot more sense, even phonetically. Now, vice versa, up here, you have Trieste, whose name is Trst on the other side. Or you have Gorizia, whose name is Gorica on the other side. And Gorica makes a lot more sense than Gorizia because Gora means hill and Gorica means small hill. So it's geographically much more reasonable for it to have a Slovenian name. Does that make sense? So there's this kind of mess in this area, all right? So I was born here, okay? And for Americans, for example, this would be almost impossible to understand because in about 40 minutes, you can travel through two countries or through one country and go to the next if you wanted to go from Italy to Croatia. Okay, this coast is very, very short. It's like 30 kilometers or something. I'm not 100% sure. It doesn't particularly matter. Anyway, one funky thing that happened in the history here, particularly during and after the Second World War, but even before, is that the people that would live there would always be prey to whatever damn government wanted them to be or do. And all governments would leverage the majority population to impose themselves on the minority. So, for example, here in the Italian area, there's lots of Slovenian names that have then been bastardized and modified to become Italian. For example, the last name Kunic, right, which I don't know what it means, frequently was translated into Coniglio, which means rabbit. Okay? Or you'd go further down and a name like, I don't know, Bianchi could be changed to Biankic. So it sounds Slavic, but it makes no sense. It means nothing in Slovenian or Croatian or Serbo-Croatian. But it means white. It's just a last name like, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, doesn't matter. So this is the kind of mess we're staring at. Okay? Now, I did my... I have lived in a very strange period of time because I did my elementary school in what was known as Yugoslavia, which would have been this entire region up here plus this region here. It was all together, okay? It was a communist dictatorship. Then, this area over here where Koper is, declared independence in the 90s and became Slovenia. That would be where Melania Trump is from, or if you're into basketball, that's where Luka Doncic is from the Lakers, right? Whereas down here, this would later then become Croatia. My father, for example, has the Croatian citizenship as well. And this is where Toni Kukoc, if you're into the old school Bulls, into The Last Dance, or say Luka Modric if you're into football, soccer, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, and this is now Italy. Okay, so I did elementary school in Yugoslavia, part of it, middle school or whatever you guys call it, I don't know, in Slovenia, and then high school in Italy. And what I discovered, despite the age being relatively tender, I still have some memories from that. What I discovered is that history essentially changes. Because we all went to school with Common Core, which means you have to do the history of the Ministry of Education that exists in that country. So under Yugoslavia, I had to learn all of these ridiculous myths about how Tito, the then... what would have been his title? I don't know, emperor, right? The communist minion at the top of the helm, right? So you had to learn, I don't know, that his German shepherd saved his life when he was about to be run over by a locomotive. This sort of like stupid myths, the kind of thing that we make fun of North Korea for now. But it was the same, fundamentally. Then we had to learn, when I was older, right, we would learn about the history of World War II and how it went, etc. And it would all be done from the perspective of the Slavs and the partisans. And the partisans are the good guys, and the fascists are the bad guys, and blah, 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 blah. Okay. Then I went to Italy. And when I was in Italy, history was totally different. Like we were talking about La Vittoria Mutilata, we were talking about D'Annunzio and La Vittoria Mutilata, and so on. All sorts of like completely different reads of the same events. So that led me to understand now as an older man that fundamentally speaking there's a heck of a lot of what people now more commonly, correctly even, refer to as propaganda. Propaganda simply means information that is to be shared for the purpose of proliferation. So everybody knows this information. Okay? It exists today, it exists all the time. It's existed before. Okay, fine. But what I've learned is that the propaganda literally depends on the sides, which means none of it is true. None of it can be true in the strict sense of what is true. None of it is factual. There you go, put it that way. Okay. Now, in Italy, there is an interesting situation. I want to specifically now focus on something. In this area over here, okay, there is a geographic formation called Il Carso, C-A-R-S-O. And in this place, there's a bunch of these sorts of grotto formations that are calcareous in nature. And there's loads of them there everywhere. Now, today I want to talk to you about a concept or a historical event called the Foibe. F-O-I-B-E. Foibe. Okay, now what are the Foibe? The Foibe are an extremely contentious historical fact where basically these cave systems were used to dispose of, I do not know what kind of number, but an enormous number of Italian origin civilians to get rid of them. Sort of death, open air graves. That's what they were. And if I understand it correctly, and I don't know how much of this is myth, the way the execution would work is all of the men and women would have been tied together, tethered together with a metal wire along their wrists, the equivalent of like, I don't know, a chain of handcuffs. And they were tied to one another. And the man or woman in front of the line would have been shot, either fatally or otherwise, and they would be pushed down in the ravine. And everybody would follow. Legend has it as well that they would bury black dogs with them. Nobody really knows why. It's very understandable. There's two theories. One is that the black dogs would exculpate, would clear the soul of whoever had done the deed of killing all of these people. Or they would be there guarding that the ghosts don't escape, or the zombies, whatever you want. Anyway, point is, loads of people would fall, would obviously get severely hurt, but not die. So they would agonize and eventually die in this place. Okay? This is the story of the Foibe. There's more details around it, But this is fundamentally how it is. Now, this story was severely suppressed. In fact, it's suppressed now. What is fascinating that I want to essentially do is I want to do a parallel because this is fundamentally, conceptually speaking, very similar to the idea of the worker camps, of the concentration camps in Poland, like Auschwitz, Dachau, etc. Because for the German story, the narrative that has won is that the Germans were bad, they've killed all of these innocent people in this gruesome way, etc. Questioning any of this makes you, in some countries, as I've said before, prosecutable. Like, you can actually end up in jail for historical revisionism. Yet, in Italy, if you support the idea that the Foibe existed and that they were gruesome and it's, I mean, there is no law to my knowledge, but you do get attacked and pilloried because you're not supposed to think that they existed. So the opposite side has won. Why? Because the opposite side is the winners of the war, the partisans. Like, I remember monuments to the Foibe being defiled, for example, with spray cans and that sort of stuff. I know to this day that on social media and similar, kids and people and crass folks use the term Foibe to essentially say you should be sent to the showers. It's sort of the same idea, right? And I think it's absolutely flipping fascinating that an incredibly cruel and awful military force like the partisans, who are known for raping and pillaging wherever they went. Of course, you're not supposed to think that. Bear that in mind. Most likely did do atrocities of this type. In fact, I'll tell you why I think that's the case. Because my grandfather, who used to work here, okay? So my grandfather, who used to work here, and he was from Banja Luka, Bosnia, so very, very, very far into the Yugoslavian reality, let's say. And my grandfather was born in 1927, if I'm not mistaken. One thing he once told me, unfortunately I will never be able to talk to him again because he's dead. But one thing he told me is that they were deathly afraid of the soldiers on their own side, the partisans. And they were always relieved when, during World War II, German skirmishes would pass through their villages. Because the Germans would give them chocolate. These are exactly the words that he used. And they would never take advantage of the women, for example. Whereas the partisans had a field day. Apparently. That's what he said. Bear in mind, he was on the side of the partisans. I am under no impression at all that my grandfather was a fascist sympathizer. I don't think so. I mean, I have found all documents that prove that he was a member of the Communist Party, and I know that his wife, my grandmother, was indeed working for the Communist Party in the local town, Piran. Right? So, was he a victim of propaganda himself? Of course. Everybody was at the time, everybody is now. But I think it's absolutely fascinating in this case, this peculiar dichotomy. That if you so much as question anything or investigate anything that has to do with the gas chambers and that sort of thing, about the German story, you are a Holocaust denier, and you must be put into jail if you're either in France or in Germany. That's remarkable. But if you openly manifest your disdain and memory, or you attempt to commemorate, to respect the history of the Foibe, there's a very serious risk that you get conked on top of your head by some kind of stupid commie idiot nowadays. And apparently the history books barely ever touch on the Foibe. Whereas the history books do nothing other than decant the situation with the shower. Basically, showers, yes. Holes in the ground, no. And I'm not claiming that one is true, the other one's false, and vice versa. I'm not claiming any of this. I'm simply stating that I don't think historical facts are facts, ever. And I'm also stating that it is very, very, very wrong for governments to regulate this. It is morally wrong. It is wrong from every perspective. Because history does not have a side and should not have a side. History is just a collection of facts. Hopefully. It isn't, as I've just explained. Indoctrinating people is wrong. And what all of these things are, all of these laws are they are effectively blasphemy laws. And they are annoying. Because there has been separation of church and state a very, very long time ago. And while you, I, or anybody else may be very happy not having to bear with traditional religion blasphemy laws like I can't swear, I can't do this against God or whatever. You know, we're happy with not having that. It doesn't mean that now we can have a different religion, which is the one that modifies what happened in the past. I don't know what happened in the past. I want to have the right and the freedom to look into what happened in the past, and I want to be able to listen to whomever I want to about it. And not just the past, but the present as well. In fact, we have all experienced this during the magic virus. All of us. The narrative was that this was the most tragic thing that has ever happened and that everybody is going to die. And that did not happen. This has happened when Al Gore used to say that the oil would end, which did not happen. And is nowhere close to happening so far as anybody knows. This didn't happen when everybody says that the earth is going to go up in flames in 10 minutes from now. I am fundamentally annoyed at all of these religious fundamentalists. I know they won't care, and that's fine. But that there are laws that stop me from being inquisitive about things is utterly unacceptable. And anybody who sustained those laws, irrespective of whether in that particular context they happen to be right and I happen to be wrong, or vice versa, or whatever, it doesn't matter. None of those are acceptable. You are wrong if you sustain these laws by virtue of doing it. If you are correct and the Foibe didn't happen and the showers did happen, or vice versa, let the investigation occur. We will find out what happened, or maybe not, but we will at least be able to look into it. You absolute pieces of work. And government, shame on all of you. All of the politicians that are in government, shame on you. Shame on any politician that attacks any quote-unquote revisionist or quote-unquote denier. Those are the people that are looking into things. They're not the people who believe, and you're destroying their lives. There are some people that believe as well, and you're destroying their lives too. I thought that believing was part of freedom of thought. Remember, this is not an attack on freedom of speech. It's an attack on freedom of thought. You're not allowed to think these things. Wrong. 100% wrong. And the people should think whatever the heck they want, in defiance of all of these stupid laws. Just like everybody breaks every speed limit, think whatever you want. And let nobody tell you what you're supposed to think. Ever. Goodbye.